Okay, we're going to get started now after our technical warm-up here.
We're so professional.
Welcome to the Atheist Community of Austin. It's a non-profit in double sense organization. By the way, there's a change. Ordinarily, after the meetings, we have our board meeting at the Dog and Duck. This time, we're going to have it at the ACA Free Thought Library on Koenig Lane. And everybody's welcome to come if you can fit in there. Okay, so this week we're having Russell Glasser talk about how social media has helped promote the atheist movement. He's a software engineer with a degree in computer science, and he's been part of the Atheist Community of Austin for 13 years and is one of the co-hosts of the Atheist Experience TV show. And by the way, you're invited to come watch the taping of the show at 4:30 in the afternoon on Mondays. So I'm going to let Russell tell you any other critical information that you need to know about him, and there's Russell.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for making it down here today, despite the flash flood warning, which actually closed ACL. So hope we all get out of here okay. I want to give you a couple of statistics that aren't necessarily related, but they're interesting to consider side by side. One of them was that there was a Pew poll that revealed that the number of Americans who did not identify with any religion is growing really fast. 6 years ago, 15% of Americans said that they were religiously unaffiliated. Last year, it was 20%. So that's a third higher over just 5 years. That's 1/5 of adults who say that they have no religious affiliation. And for adults under 30, it's a third. And my other statistic is that as of June 2012, 72% of all households have broadband internet connections. 2013. Now, I'm sure that neither of these facts is really a huge surprise to anybody in this room. Most of you probably know how big an impact the internet has on all our day-to-day lives. But I've felt for a really long time that the rise of unbelief in America is largely, it owes a lot to the growth of social media and the internet. And so in this talk, I'm going to talk about exactly how they relate to each other. And I'm going to try to help you hopefully leverage that information to have more effective discussions online. So here's where we're going. First, I'm going to give you a brief and sort of nerdy history of the internet. Then we're going to talk about the impact of the internet on religious discussions. And then we're going to talk about sort of the transition from the old internet to the new internet, which they used to refer to as Web 2.0 when they were really into buzzwords about it. And then we're going to talk about some practical ways to leverage this information for you to use. And then I'm going to give some kind of warnings about why you should be a little cautious around social media. So to start with, first of all, I don't think I could get away with giving a lecture on the internet to a general audience like you if this were 20 years ago. When I was an undergraduate at the University of California in San Diego, I used to listen to this morning radio show called Dave Shelley and Chainsaw. I actually did a little of the original content for their first web page. And one morning I was listening to the show, and Dave, a very interesting and witty radio host, they were all talking about what to do about sitting on an airplane and having a boring person who wants to talk to you next to you. And Dave says, I have a really easy solution that I use. Somebody asks me, what do you do? And I say, computers. And he said, that shuts him right up. That was 20 years ago. Now, how many of you guys have a computer at home? Like, does anybody not have a computer at home? Does anybody not have a broadband connection at home, like I just said a minute ago? Okay, so I believe that's absolutely everybody has both a computer and a broadband connection. So I have earned the right to let my nerd freak flag fly right now. So I want to talk a little bit about where the internet has been, and I'm trying hard not to sound too much like Grandpa Simpson. Back in those days, we used a browser that was called NCSA Mosaic, and it ran on Unix systems with modems that downloaded 14.4 kilobits per second. So this is a map of the internet, the year that I was born. This is 1974. And as you can see, like, each one of these is a computer. This is all there is to it. There are less than 50 right here, and a lot of them are names of universities because that's where the academic internet lived. Over here somewhere, here's my alma mater, UCSD. Let's see, so in 1974 you could log on to one of the systems here, one of these terminals, and read a handful of online papers and exchange messages, and that was about all you could do. In fact, in 1982, 8 years later, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology came out with a handbook on network etiquette, and here's what it says. In one section it says, it is considered illegal to use the ARPANET, which was the internet back then, for anything which is not in direct support of government business. Personal messages to other ARPANET subscribers, for example, to arrange a get-together or check and say a friendly hello, are generally not considered harmful. Sending electronic mail over the ARPANET for commercial profit or political purposes is both antisocial and illegal. By sending such messages, you can offend many people, and it is possible to get MIT in serious trouble with the government agencies which manage the ARPANET. You can see how much trouble Barack Obama would have been back then, because I know most of you get his email that has some political promotion in it. I mean, even Amazon.com, they send you emails all the time. They make a little bit of profit, so I heard. So that was the state of the internet in the 80s, and it took more than 10 years after that for the Pew Research Center to actually get around to taking some surveys of how many households had internet access. Now, I started college right over here. They didn't even measure it yet. It wasn't worth measuring because almost nobody had heard of it, and then the year they started measuring it, 1995, I was, in my third year of college. I started out as a physics major, but then got convinced by a roommate. Well, there was a little friendly in-dorm game creation competition of sorts. And so we all made some DOS-based games, and I switched from physics to computer science because it was really cool. But it took a while for the internet to catch on even then. There was this computer lab at UCSD. And here in 1995, the computer lab was mostly the domain of the hardcore geeks like me. I mean, you could go in anytime, you could get a Unix terminal, just sit down whenever you wanted to, unless it was the night before a big project, and then it was kind of streaming with people trying to get in their stuff by midnight. The walls in that computer lab were covered with dot matrix printouts that had things like the Star Trek Next Generation drinking game rules, jokes about Unix administrators, haha. But as the web browsers got more popular, I gradually saw more and more students not doing work, but goofing around in the lab. They were looking at their entertainment pages and sometimes porn in public. And there was no such thing as a high-speed internet connection anywhere in the dorms, definitely. I really noticed the turning point by the time I was getting ready to graduate. In 1997, I had some theater classes because I had to fill some time. I almost had all my requirements out of the way. And there were young theater majors who had email addresses. And 1997, right here, what is this? Getting up to 30%, but I was surprised. So now you get all the way to 2011, which is as far as this graph goes, and we're pushing up on 80% at that point. It's a couple years later now, so it's probably a couple points higher already. And like I said, now 72% of people not only have internet connections, but actual broadband. So obviously, the internet has dramatically changed the way that we think about things. In 1997, I went to a conference on computer graphics, and I had the good fortune to hear a guy named Bran Farren give the keynote address. He, at the time, was the president of the company that designs Disney theme park rides. And he asked the audience whether they thought that the internet was a passing craze like CB radio. And he said, and a lot of people really did, and he said, "You're all wrong. As inventions go, it's not CB radio, it's fire." Here's what the internet has done for us. It's given us a giant repository of all human knowledge. I mean, it's put information about millions of topics just a few keystrokes away at all times. Wikipedia alone, which is not the internet, but which is not the whole internet, but sometimes it seems like it, they have 31 million articles. Among those articles, the top 5,000 articles all get accessed at least 20,000 times a week. So the 5,000th most popular Wikipedia article gets about 20,000 hits a week, and then it goes up from there. So when it comes to questions of pure factual information, one of the things is I never have to argue with anybody about factual information, because if I want to say, like, who played the bad guy in Monsters, Inc. and what else has he been in, nobody has to sit around and think about it. They just pull out their phone and they pull up the IMDb app, and I bet some of you have already got it. It was Steve Buscemi. And if my son asks, like, why do trucks use diesel fuel instead of regular fuel, I don't really know. I'm not a car guy. But I actually can punch in natural language. This is a Star Trek communicator I've got right here. I just go, computer, why do trucks use diesel fuel? And somebody, somewhere, has written a really well-worded, concise article that has been voted up by lots of internet users, and they give the concise explanation that I need to explain this answer to an 11-year-old. And I can't overstate how amazing that is. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. It's a really popular book. It's actually about a fictional book called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which he imagined as the ultimate reference guide to everything in civilization. But Douglas Adams' idea fell short, because if The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was as good as the internet, the entry on Earth would never have been reduced down to mostly harmless, because there would be thousands of very special interest Earth geeks who were filling in that information all the time. But the internet isn't just a static dumping ground for information, it's also given us sort of a limited form of telepathy. Before the telegraph was invented, it could take months for a handwritten letter to reach somebody across the country. Today, you can dash an email or send a text message, and it'll show up in a few seconds to anywhere in the world immediately. In 1970, there was a TV advertisement for a telephone company bragging that you could make a long-distance phone call for as little as 70 cents a minute. You know how I know that? I saw the commercial on YouTube. Today you can do live video calls over Skype or Google Hangouts, and it's virtually free because it's just already built into the broadband internet that 72% of people have. So I know we haven't achieved everything from the Jetsons yet. I mean, I'd like some flying cars. I'd even settle for a hoverboard. But come on, we have free video calls all the time. Isn't anybody impressed by that? And your messages, here's the thing, they're not just limited to just one person at a time. By taking advantage of Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, message boards, blogs, the comment section of popular articles, you can not only make a call to your friends and family, but you can also broadcast a message to hundreds, thousands, millions with practically no extra effort. All right, so that does it for the initial history of the internet. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the impact that the internet has on discussions about atheism. This past July, the New York Times ran a story that was titled, "Some Mormons Search the Web and Find Doubt." I think that headline is putting it mildly. Let me read an excerpt to you. When fellow believers in Sweden began coming to Mormon elder Hans Mattsson with information from the internet that contradicted the church's history and teachings, he dismissed it as anti-Mormon propaganda, the whisperings of Lucifer. He asked his superiors for help in responding to the members' doubts, and when they seemed to only sidestep the questions, Mr. Mattsson began his own investigation. But when he discovered credible evidence that the church founder, Joseph Smith, was a polygamist, he didn't know that, and that the Book of Mormon and other scriptures were rife with historical anomalies, Mr. Mattsson said he felt that the foundation on which he had built his life began to crumble. Around the world and in the United States, where the faith was founded, the Mormon Church is grappling with a wave of doubt and disillusionment among members who encountered information on the internet that sabotaged what they thought about their faith, according to interviews with dozens of Mormons and those who study the church. And here's a quote from Mattsson. "I feel like I had an earthquake under my feet. Everything I'd been taught, everything I'd been proud to preach about and witness about just crumbled under my feet. It was such a terrible psychological and nearly physical disturbance." Mr. Mattsson's decision to go public with his disaffection in a church whose top leaders commonly deliberate in private is a sign that the church faces serious challenges, not just from outside, but also now from skeptics inside. It's kind of tough to live in a culture that doesn't take your religion seriously. And as a side note, 2 nights ago, Linnea and I saw Book of Mormon, which was hilarious and has won a Tony Award, and I'm sure that hasn't helped. Let's see. So I would bet that the show is also making Mormons run into a few ideas that they wouldn't normally have thought of. So, you know, we're talking about Mormons now, but I promise I can find another example from every major religion, like this one from Slate. Once upon a time, a Hasidic Jew looking for escape might have gone to the library, but F. Wiesel discovered her public library existed at around the same time that she also discovered the internet. Wiesel started going online when she was 19 on her husband's laptop. Within 2 years, she began exploring blogs by people who had left Hasidism, and she had a huge realization. She wasn't the only Hasidic Jew questioning what she now calls a lifetime of indoctrination and being taught not to think. When she set up an anonymous Facebook account, her profile picture was a painting of Eve in the Garden of Eden. I don't know if it was that one, but that's a good one. That is also not a G-rated one if I had showed you the whole thing. Implying that the internet had become her tree of knowledge. In time, Wiesel became so rebellious, she asked to stop shaving the hair she covered with a scarf, flouting the standards for married women in her community, that she says she was asked by community leaders to hand over the laptop, but it was too late. There's Mormons and Jews. You can find similar stories if you Google them for Jehovah's Witnesses, Scientologists, Catholics, Baptists, fundamentalists. you name it. This problem is actually so bad that it's regularly acknowledged now by professional evangelicals like Josh McDowell here, who is the author of Evidence That Demands a Verdict, about the definitely true existence and divinity of Jesus Christ. He says, the internet has given atheists, agnostics, skeptics, the people who like to destroy everything that you and I believe, almost equal access to your kids as your youth pastor and you have, whether you like it or not. The abundance of information has led to skepticism, and the internet has leveled the playing field. Here's the bottom line. Evangelicals are really eager to share their view of the world with everyone who will listen. But on some level, shoring up the troops in religion often relies on maintaining ignorance, either intentionally through secrecy or just by living in a place where your views are never challenged. I'm going to come back and justify this claim a little better in a minute, because I don't want to say that all religious people are ignorant. I know some very smart ones. But for now, I'll just say that there are dozens of major religions and hundreds of thousands of subgroups in those major religions, and many of them make claims that are, in fact, mutually contradictory. And as Austin Klein from about.atheism.com put it once, religions can't all be true, but they can all be false. Because there are so many sets of ideas that are accepted with minimal or no evidence, religious people are often pretty adept at tuning out competing information. So here's a typical conversation that I'll have with Christians. They say, you can't expect God to be subject to human logic. You should just have faith like me. And I'll say, well, if I did decide to put faith in something, why would it be your particular brand of religion? Why would it be Christianity at all? Why wouldn't I just start believing in Allah? Or sometimes it's the reverse. When I argue with Muslims, I get kind of a perverse pleasure out of saying, hey, have you ever considered accepting Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior? The thing is, respect for faith seems to evaporate the moment you try to bring up any competing religion, and suddenly logic and evidence become really important in justifying competing points of view. I believe it was last week, I was on the Atheist Experience with my wife Linnea, and she told a caller that she had gone back in time and created the universe herself. And then she pressed him to explain why he didn't believe this. And he said, well, I guess I just need some kind of proof to know that I should take your word for it. And we said, exactly. I've found that I can get the very best arguments for debunking non-mainstream religions like Wicca, Mormonism, Scientology by listening to mainstream Christian evangelicals, because they have incredible critical thinking skills, as long as it's not about their own stuff. So this is what the atheist author John Loftus has referred to. He coined this as the outsider test for faith, which is test your beliefs as if you were an outsider in the faith that you are evaluating. However, a lot of religious people never have any reason to consider the outsider test because they never run into any competing religions. If you're born into a religious family, you live in a religious community, you go to church with like-minded people, it's probably a very rare event for you to come into much contact with competing points of view. Or at least it used to be. See, this is where the internet really comes into play, because when 72% of all households have broadband internet, the internet is a fact of life. I mean, every single person in this room has got some internet. If you didn't have access to the internet, I would be surprised. It would be like being 20 years ago saying that your household doesn't have a TV or a phone line. It's just something we all take for granted now, and as I showed you before, it's happened in a very, very short time frame that some of us don't really stop to think about. And because the internet is such an integrated part of all our lives at this point, we don't just have the opportunity to meet lots of people who have different opinions from us, we're more or less forced to in a lot of cases. Sooner or later, if you're dealing with any kind of mix of people, you're going to run into somebody who doesn't agree with you. Like, Americans don't run into only Americans. They run into people from other countries who have other stupid beliefs, or they run into people from one of those evil European countries who, mostly they have a much higher proportion of atheists there than we do here. And even if you have the good fortune to be raised by atheist parents, which I was, there is no way you're not running into Christianity. There's no way that you're not running into competing views throughout your life, which is why for atheists, what the internet is bringing is kind of familiar and comfortable in a way. It's like, we're already used to constant conflict to begin with. It's those people living in small-town rural America where everybody is the same religion except for one lonely person that the internet starts becoming sort of threatening seeming. Here's some email that we received just last week, and trust me when I say that I could probably find a similar email just about any week I chose to look. It says, "I'm 17 years old and I'm an atheist. I became an atheist about a year ago. Before I was an atheist, I was a fundamentalist Christian, and my entire family belongs to this religion. My father is an elder in my church, and my mom is the head of the education ministry. As you can imagine, this is causing some strong tensions in my life. I often get singled out, and ever since I came out as being an atheist, everyone around me who is a Christian has been treating me like I'm some sort of troublemaker, and my sole purpose in life is to make people mad." In America, if you grow up in a Christian household, you're going to run into other Christians. If you stop being a Christian, you're still going to run into other Christians. If you grow up in an atheist household, you're still going to run into Christians. But for ideas that are true, running into competing ideas is an advantage, not a drawback. Earlier, I claimed that religious beliefs tend to rely on sustained ignorance to some extent, so let me go back and try to justify that now. And I'm going to do it by introducing you to a concept that a lot of you have probably heard of, memes. Let's see here. Okay, so a meme, I skipped a page, there we go. The meme was coined by Richard Dawkins in his 1976 book, The Selfish Gene. And ordinarily at this point, if I'm giving a talk about atheism and I want to bring up memes, I have to explain what Dawkins really meant. But today we're talking about the internet, so I think it would be more fitting to illustrate them this way. That a lot of you are probably familiar with this particular picture, but what I'm talking about is that a meme on the internet is a discrete chunk of information. Most often it's a picture that gets paired up with some helpful text. And it gets spread around from account to account by being passed along and shared. And sometimes memes live lives of their own, a long life, by getting replicated a lot by a lot of different people for a very long time. Now, this is our good friend Dave Silverman, who is president of American Atheists and recent Bat Cruise attendee. Dave, in 2011, famously went on the O'Reilly Factor with Bill O'Reilly, and Bill O'Reilly, Dave asked if there was any proof of God, and Bill O'Reilly said, "Well, tides go in, tide goes out, never a miscommunication. You can't explain that." So Dave made this face. And within days, somebody had taken a still shot of the video and made some nice artwork out of it, because it's really a picture for all occasions, right? The text down here is Dave Silverman's sentiment. What the heck? And that is an emotion that people like to express a lot on the internet. So this has become known as the "Are you serious" meme. And this is a very well-adapted meme for personal survival. The idea of a meme is that it's kind of like a gene. Genes can replicate and create copies of themselves, and if they have traits that are adapted for survival, then they live longer, and there's more of them. And then other memes survive for different reasons. This is one meme, this is one of a series of memes known as Stupid Ned Stark. If any of you are familiar with the popular TV show Game of Thrones, Ned Stark is this very noble, heroic character who goes through a lot of trials, and a lot of viewers have noticed that Ned Stark, while being undeniably noble, is kind of honorable to the point of being a little dumb. So here we have him in a typical conundrum. Littlefinger tells you not to trust him? Trust Littlefinger. This one is very well adapted for survival also because it is an in-joke that, it doesn't have to reach everybody, but it is something that if you are a Game of Thrones fan, then you really appreciate it. And then some memes are a little less context specific. This is one of a series of memes where basically somebody says something completely crazy that makes no sense, and then therefore your argument is invalid. And we've all run into conversations like this, right? It's really good for illustrating, for instance, what presuppositional apologetics sound like. And you'll notice that the picture features a cat, which is cute, and therefore immediately popular on the internet. In fact, if you have a cat, you don't even need especially clever text. This is Grumpy Cat, and I know it's one of Martin Wagner's personal favorites, so I made sure to include it for him. Some pictures express a general emotion so well that they can be fitted with all kinds of different text. It's a picture for all occasions. Here we see condescending Wonka. This is, of course, from the 1971 classic Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and actually in this scene, Mr. Wonka is very smug because he's bragging about how great his candy is. But he kind of looks like he's talking down to you, right? Which is why this picture still shows up all over the place to say something sarcastic, like, oh, evolution has been discredited by scientists? Enlighten me with more of your church pamphlet science. This picture, not necessarily this text, but this picture shows up everywhere because everybody loves being sarcastic. And then some memes just back to the in-jokes. Some of them just make fun of a particular aspect of pop culture. This guy here is Georgio Tsoukalos. I believe that's how you pronounce it. And he's this crazy Greek guy who hosts a show on the History Channel called Ancient Aliens, where he posits that ancient structures like the pyramids and stuff are too complicated to be created by mere humans, so it must have been aliens. So if anything interesting exists in the world, he thinks that it was aliens. So Richard Dawkins was interviewed by Wired magazine earlier this year, and they asked him, how do you feel about your word meme being reappropriated by the internet? He said, the meaning is not that far away from the original. It's anything that goes viral. In the original introduction to the word meme in the last chapter of The Selfish Gene, I actually use the metaphor of a virus. So when anybody talks about something going viral on the internet, that is exactly what a meme is. And it looks as though the word has been appropriated for a subset of that. So more broadly, the word meme, like I said, it's analogous to a gene, and it says something about ideas surviving and reproducing because of their survival value. They could be replicated to a lot of minds in general, or Facebook walls, I guess. And as we've seen, internet memes can be well adapted for survival if they're funny or meaningful, or if they express some kind of outrage that people already feel, or if they're good in-jokes. In the broader sense, where a meme can be just any idea that gets replicated in different people's heads, there are bigger reasons why some ideas might survive. Like, for instance, maybe they're true. Maybe they actually express something true and profound about the world that is useful to know, like, the Earth goes around the sun, and the sun is actually much, much bigger than the Earth, and so forth. But alternatively, memes don't have to be true. They could just be replicated because they're really interesting and compelling. Like, for instance, you will never really die. When you think you're dying, you'll just go to a place where you'll be happy forever. That's really cool. If I believed that, it would make me feel really good, and I would want to tell other people, no matter how true it happened to be. But there is another mechanism besides just being true or cool or applicable to different situations. There are other mechanisms that memes have available to them, which I kind of alluded to earlier. That's the suppression of doubt and the suppression of competing memes. Like I said, religion's relying on sustained ignorance, and I don't just want to say that like it's me criticizing religion. Here's a quote from the Bible. This is from Romans chapter 14, verses 22 and 23. So whatever you believe about these things, keep between yourself and God. Blessed is the one who does not condemn himself by what he approves, but whoever has doubts is condemned if they eat, because their eating is not from faith. And everything that does not come from faith is sin. Let me say that one more time. Whoever has doubts is condemned. Everything that does not come from faith is sin. You notice that this particular verse doesn't directly address any possible doubts that you might have. It doesn't do anything to settle your concerns that you might be listening to something that really isn't true. The passage just says that doubt itself is bad, and and it vaguely threatens that something dangerous is going to happen to you if you doubt. This is a mechanism which is attached directly to quite a lot of religions. Because not only are you supposed to believe that Jesus rose from the dead to wash away our sins so that you will not die but experience life eternal, but you also have to work really hard to keep your own doubt under control. You'd better keep believing it, because if you stop believing it, then that won't happen anymore. So I think you can see why people with a scientific mindset should naturally have the edge in internet conversations. The whole of the scientific method is actually about coming into contact with competing ideas and beating them, not just by being interesting and sexy, but also by being true and verifiable and able to be duplicated by a lot of different people. The main thing that's changed about the internet in the last decade or so is that creating your own content on the web has just gotten easier and easier every year. Let me show you. This is what it looked like when I was editing the very first homepage that I ever wrote. This is called hypertext markup language, or HTML for short. And back then, this is me at 19 or so. So it's not the most sophisticated HTML code in the world, but it's what pretty much everybody had to do, which was open a text editor and learn this kind of archaic language, or arcane language, let's say, and figure out how to format stuff and make paragraphs show up in the right place, and create your own hyperlinks and so forth. let's see. Yeah, if you want to create a web page now, well, if you want to create a web page with business logic, you still have to know how to do this because you have to write code that generates the stuff. So that's why I still have job security. But if you're just some person who doesn't want to learn special languages, stuff started to pop up in the late 90s, like Google's Blogger website, which enabled people to have a simple online editor that could create and publish articles on a regular basis really easily without having any technical expertise at all. So here is what the editor for the Atheist Experience blog looks like right now. This is a post that I wrote last week. And okay, I'll admit, it's still a little bit intimidating looking. It's got a lot of buttons and stuff, but the thing is, it takes a lot less effort to learn. You type in a title up here, you put your content in here. I found this picture on the internet and I kind of dragged it into the post, and then there was a little form to type in the caption, and when I'm done with this thing, I just hit update over here or preview, and suddenly, bam, everybody who likes to read our blog is able to get access to this post. So it's a lot easier now. And let's see. So this and a lot of other web software has really changed the game because now we have a lot of people who don't have to specialize in computer languages, but they might be experts in a lot of other fields. And it's easy for all of them to contribute information that can be searched and found by anyone in the world. So returning to that earlier point, this is really good for scientific knowledge and really bad for anything that relies on secrecy, like religion. False information is a lot easier to correct. On the other hand, I don't want to get you too overconfident about the power of the internet to give your arguments superpowers. Just because something is true doesn't mean that people will have an easy time accepting it. In fact, a lot of the time, the internet actually has the opposite effect. Eli Pariser, the author of The Filter Bubble, What the Internet is Hiding from You, gives us a little food for thought right here. He says, by now, we're familiar with ads that follow us around online based on our recent clicks on commercial websites. But increasingly, and nearly invisibly, our searches for information are being personalized too. So two different people who each search on Google for Egypt might get significantly different results based on their past clicks. Both Yahoo News and Google News make adjustments to their home pages for each individual visitor, and just last month the technology began making inroads on the websites of newspapers like the Washington Post and the New York Times. All this is fairly harmless when information about consumer products is filtered into and out of your personal universe. But when personalization affects not just what you buy, but how you think, different issues can arise. Democracy depends on the citizen's ability to engage with multiple viewpoints. The internet limits such engagement when it offers up only information that reflects your already established point of view. While it's sometimes convenient to see only what you want to see, it's critical at other times that you see things that you don't want to see. So the practical effect of this is that often the internet does enable you to seek out new information, but just as often it allows you to pick and choose what your slant on that information should be. If you want to believe that global warming doesn't exist or creationism is really popular among mainstream scientists, then you can find a community of like-minded people who will keep telling you that, and you can just listen to them. Now, this might seem to kind of contradict stuff I said earlier. On the one hand, the internet pushes people to come in contact with other people who have radically different views. On the other hand, the internet inundates us with so much information that we have to come up with a filtering mechanism, and that filtering mechanism is highly personalized, and if you're not careful, then your filters might block out anything you don't want to hear. So on some level, that seems to put us right back where we started before the internet, but not really. Because prior to the internet, the typical situation was very much a case of majority rules. So if you are a lone atheist in a Christian community, like that kid who wrote us the letter earlier, then the majority could effectively shame, silence, and isolate you. And you could wind up thinking that you are the only dissenter in the world, so you must be the crazy one. When you access the internet, suddenly you've got the ability to connect to alternate opinions that you want to hear, and you can weigh them against the input that you get from your family and your peers. So the internet can't force people to change the way they think, but it can at least make them aware that there are other ways to think in the first place, and sometimes that might be all that it takes. All right, so we're up to part 4, which is where I try to give you really deep and profound advice about how you can leverage this to your advantage. So here's my advice. Number 1, when you communicate with people, one of the things that the internet has done for you is make it super easy for you to research stuff. So do that. Because if all that we've got as our meme's personal advantage is that it's probably true and well documented, then you better be doing your homework. This can be as simple as just looking something up on Wikipedia, because even though we know that Wikipedia is just written by a lot of clowns who might have their own agenda to push around, Wikipedia generally tends to have good citations at the bottom, so that if you find something and you ask yourself, is this thing that they're saying really true? Does it come from a credible source? You can go to the bottom and you can click on the original site so that you can read the article in the Science Journal, or you can read the piece that showed up in a mainstream newspaper. You can demonstrate to yourself that you're passing along true information. And also there are sites like Snopes, which specialize in debunking arguments or debunking urban legends, so that it can kind of nip in the bud people who are passing along nonsense. So do your research. Number 2 is, I've just showed you that there are 2 different ways that the internet affects us. One is that it forces us to come into contact with opposing points of view, and the other is that it enables us to shut them all out if we feel like it. You will be smarter and better informed if you at least listen to what the other side is saying all the time. And believe me, it's easy to find out what the other side is saying. It doesn't mean that you have to take them seriously, but you should at least go and read what other people are saying on the opposite side. Don't just rely on an echo chamber effect to tell you what's true. Now this is an interesting one. I mentioned, so this says, spend your effort wisely and talk to people who are reachable. I mentioned earlier that the internet enables you to reach millions of people just by writing a blog article somewhere. And likewise, if you have a whole lot of friends, or if you're good at generating content that gets duplicated among a lot of Facebook accounts and retweeted by a lot of Twitter accounts, you can reach a lot of people with fairly minimal effort. And that means you should be intelligent about who you waste your time on, because if somebody writes you a private email and says, "Hi, I'm a creationist and you can't prove me wrong no matter what," my reaction is just, okay, I won't try then, because there are better people I could be talking to. This is true both on and offline, but it's helpful to be able to sort of read the mood of the person you're talking to and kind of figure out what their interests are. Reach as wide an audience as possible, or if you're talking to just one person, figure out what kinds of things they're interested in and talk to them in a way that's useful. And you don't have to, just because you can come in contact with 7 billion people in the world over the internet doesn't mean that all 7 billion of them have a claim on your time. It's okay to just pull the plug on a conversation and walk away and say, I've got better things to do, because if nothing else, the internet is really good about wasting your time. Let's see. Well, actually, before I get to part 5, I just wanted to say that I'm a really big fan, when talking about atheism, of referring to cultural drift, which is that you don't have to change someone's mind all at once. You can shift their opinion slightly, and if you do that a lot with a whole lot of different people, then over time the general culture will become more sympathetic to your point of view if you're doing it effectively. So now I'm coming to the downer part of the talk, and I'll bring you back up before we finish. But by now you might be thinking that more communication is always better, and we should embrace the ethos of listening to all sides of an argument and letting the truth win out. But I do want to give you a few words of caution about the internet. First of all, enabling more open input in a domain that relies on expert opinion doesn't necessarily improve the total amount of information that people are getting. So, case in point, there was a study published in the peer-reviewed journal, the Journal of Computer-Mediated Communications, last February. This paper was called "The Nasty Effect: Online Incivility and Risk Perception in Emerging Technologies." This is a description of some of their findings as outlined in a New York Times editorial that the researchers contributed. They said, uncivil comments in a scientific article not only polarized readers, but they often changed a participant's interpretation of the news story itself. In the civil group, those who initially did or did not support the technology, whom we identified with preliminary survey questions, continued to feel the same way after reading the comments. But those who were exposed to rude comments ended up with a much more polarized understanding of the risks that were connected with the technology. Simply including an ad hominem attack in a reader comment was enough to make study participants think about the downside of the reported technology and say it was greater than they'd previously thought. So in other words, if we're dealing with a subject that has a more likely correct answer, like just presenting the results of a scientific investigation, open communication can actually be detrimental to readers as far as helping them to understand the subject at hand. If you have an article by an informed expert on a subject, but then you follow up with a bunch of people saying, your argument sucks, take your shirt off, whatever. Or they say the technology is dangerous, but they don't have any research of their own to back this up, people can be swayed inappropriately by this extra content. And that's part of the reason why a month after this editorial was published, Popular Science, a website and magazine dedicated to bringing science to a broad layperson audience, decided that they were shutting down all their comment sections. They cited the study and said, if you carry out those results to their logical end, commenters shape public opinion shapes public policy shapes how and whether and what research gets funded, and you'll see why we want to hit the off switch. A politically motivated, decades-long war on expertise has eroded the popular consensus on a wide variety of scientifically validated topics. Everything from evolution to the origins of climate change is mistakenly up for grabs again. Scientific certainty is just another thing for two people to debate on television. And because comment sections tend to be a grotesque reflection of the media culture surrounding them, the cynical work of undermining bedrock scientific doctrine is now being done beneath our own stories within a website devoted to championing science. A lot of people online claim that they have the right to directly comment on anything and everything they see. And they mistakenly say that this is an issue of free speech and that you're somehow oppressing them if you turn off your comments section. That's not true. your right to free speech does not mean that you have the right to intrude everywhere in every private space. It doesn't mean that you have a right to post and comment in every single forum that you find. It just means that nobody can politically suppress you from getting your point across anywhere. You still have the right to start your own blog wherever you want to. You still have the right to tell as many people as will listen to you what you think about those technologies. But the right to speak doesn't extend automatically to the right to make other people hear you. And this isn't an issue that just professional publications have to worry about. There was a girl named Hannah Smith from Leicestershire, England, who killed herself this past August. In her suicide note, she wrote, "As I sit here day by day, I wonder if it's going to get better. I want to die. I want to be free. I can't live like this anymore. I'm not happy." And it turned out that a big contributor to her suicidal feelings were from bullying messages that she received on the social media site ask.fm. Kids from her school called her a fat C word, and they said she should kill herself, and she did. Her mother said they were telling her to cut herself and do it properly so that it counts, and they also said she should hang herself. In Hannah's diary, she said she wanted to die because she felt worthless. Now, I think we can all agree that having a teenager kill herself over a bunch of stupid comments by an angry mob is not an optimal outcome for online communications. And this kind of bullying isn't just restricted to kids. One of the examples I like to bring up also is a female video logger named Anita Sarkeesian, who does a regular web series called Feminist Frequency. Last year, Anita launched a Kickstarter campaign to research and discuss how women are portrayed in video games. Her Kickstarter was fully funded, and she's produced 3 half-hour videos so far, and they're really good. You should check them out. But during the campaign, I'm reading from a post on policymike.com right now. It says she found herself targeted by thousands of commenters threatening violence, rape, and even murder. Her Wikipedia entry was vandalized by people with dozens of different IP addresses. Attempts were made to hack into her email and other online accounts. Distributed denial of service attacks were launched to knock her website offline for days at a time. She was harassed by pornographic renderings depicting her being raped by video game characters, and a particularly dedicated harasser created a video game where people were invited to beat the bitch, which caused a virtual Sarkeesian to become bloody and bruised. Cyberbullying is a real thing, guys. It happens on social media regularly, even within the atheist community. Major atheist conventions use hashtags, which are easily identifiable keywords that you can use in Twitter posts about the convention, and you can use it to help facilitate discussion between convention attendees. There are a number of people on Twitter who seem to have made it their life's mission to constantly post whenever a convention is running and use the hashtag to write abusive things about the speakers or the people attending. And that brings me to my final point, which is that when I said earlier that you should use the platform effectively and not feel forced to personally address every single person that you meet on Facebook or Twitter or your blog, I also mean that you should use the block button really liberally. I mean, the block button is your friend, and you are not a bad person or a free speech suppressor if you decide that there are some people you just don't want to be in contact with. The internet is still an open platform to them. It's just that they're not free to make you listen to their harassment and abuse. And I also believe that the online services should help aid people to make it as easy as possible to keep other people from the kind of abuse that made Hannah kill herself. Sorry for bringing you guys down. Okay, so I had a slide earlier that I skipped. But anyway, What I'm trying to say, though, is that the internet is this amazing platform for spreading communication among people all over the world, and it's not necessarily going to directly bring people to the truth, but it is going to force people to come in contact with competing ideas, and some of those ideas might be true. There's this old quote that everybody loves, which is that a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes. And that's by Mark Twain, so obviously that was way before the internet. That's always been true. People can always spread lies easily. But now I want to return to the ominous quote by Josh McDowell. The internet has leveled the playing field, which means that it at least gives the truth a fighting chance, and it gives you a way to counter the ridiculous things that most people in the world believe. And that's it. Yes?
You have the chart up there that showed the growth of percentage internet use.
Right.
I guess that's in America.
Yes.
I wondered if you also would plot the percentage of people who don't profess any exact belief in God on the same time scale. Whether
I don't have that on me. I mean, there is data. What was that guy's name that we talked to on the TV show? Who you and I talked to him, Don. He had an article in the New York Times.
Was it?
What? No. The good guy.
Gregory S. Paul.
Gregory Paul has an article that talks about the recent growth of non-believers. I think the growth of people who actually self-identify as atheists is actually fairly small in the United States. But people are abandoning their religion in record numbers. We still have a long way to go. And we're not nearly to the level that Europe is, but look up Gregory S. Paul. That's the best I can do there. Yes?
Do you know of any hard and fast rules or any that you use to determine whether a comment thread or a discussion board is actually worth participating in following, and when you say okay, wasting time?
This might sound a little bit cowardly, but I personally don't like to be outnumbered because there's a limited amount of attention that you have to give to each thread. Attention is a personal resource. And if a thread is getting too bogged down in 20 people responding to everything you say, you're only going to wind up making yourself look bad no matter how right you are, because the thing is you can't possibly devote the same amount of attention that 20 people do. Also, being part of that 20 people, mob doesn't necessarily make you look good. So I like to get in on comments which are just slightly outnumbered and help tip the balance a little bit. If a critical web link to an important piece of research that definitively proves somebody is wrong can help tip the balance, or even a sarcastic remark that kind of emboldens other people to come forward in a thread can actually change the way that things are going, then you can improve the quality of that conversation. Generally, I'm in favor of boldly stating your opinions wherever you go, and making personal friends with people who seem to be on your side but a little more timid than you are. And I like having the opportunity to, if somebody is saying something clearly wrong, don't jump in there unless, like I said earlier, you've done a little research and are sure that you can back up your point in a way that's very clear to everyone. Does that answer the question? Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Yes?
So in terms of the statistics in Europe about the number of atheists,
right.
So what's the reason for that? It's just that because in general Europeans are more educated than Americans, and if you just look at level of education?
I wouldn't necessarily say that, and this is a little bit of a tangent to the internet discussion because the The Europeans being less religious happened a while ago. I think the best theory I've heard is that even though the official separation of church and state is kind of a good thing in the United States, Europeans have never had that, but over time the church and the state have kind of melded together in sort of one giant annoying but sort of harmless entity. So like you do have an official Church of England, but it's just, it's unintrusive enough to not force people to join up, but it's just it's just barely in your face enough to make not liking religion seem to be like the same thing that saying I don't like the government is over here. So I think that's been beneficial to atheists in a way, but I don't have a definitive answer to that. Dr. D?
You had said that computers is a way of silencing somebody in an airplane.
Yeah.
Years ago, W.H. Auden, the great poet, used to silence people on trains by saying he was a medieval historian.
I bet that would still work.
Yes, right, that's what you said. You also said in one of the slides that research is easy. I think finding web pages is easy.
Yes.
Research is still very hard.
Right. Really rigorous research is still hard, and I still, in putting up the kinds of graphs and charts that I have here, had to borrow heavily from other people who were the shoulders of giants that came before me and were able to do this research. And I still have to put in some critical thinking in order to decide that a slide isn't worth showing because it comes from a non-reputable source. But research is definitely easier than if you had to go and look up the same material in a library. I mean, I have a great fondness for libraries, but I'm not sad that having physical reference materials is gradually dying a well-deserved death.
But still, there is the problem of
Yes?
accessing materials. See, people are reading websites, and whether they're Mormons or whatever, encountering different information, but you still have to have the critical skills and a fair amount of background knowledge.
You do, yes.
To assess all of these things, because they're just thrown out there in this great flood. And deciding what's reliable. I tried asking Eugene Robinson when he was here a couple of days ago, the A.L.S. Davis lecture, how do you decide? And he fell back on the credibility of the Washington Post and the New York Times.
Yeah, while I think that the Washington Post and the New York Times have some credibility in the grand scheme of things, I also think that you still have to figure out the New York Times is like a few steps above Wikipedia. I wouldn't cite a Wikipedia article as evidence, but I would find out where the Wikipedia article got their information and keep going. Yes? What?
I'm new, but I'm wondering, most of all of the arguments that religious people make
Yes.
are pretty much your standard library of rhetoric.
Right.
They have a standard set of things that they say, and there are well-documented sources of all the contradictions in the Bible and this kind of thing.
Yes.
I'm curious if there is something to the effect of an atheistpedia.
I'm glad you asked that question. It happens that Matt Dillahunty and I, a few years ago, noticed that there was a distinct lack of a consolidated resource for that kind of thing, and we put together, with the help of some more technically savvy people who set this up for us in the first place, we set up this site called Iron Chariots, which is a good resource. It comes from a Bible verse that says, "And the Lord was with Judah, and he drove out the inhabitants of the mountain, but he could not drive out the inhabitants of the valley because they had chariots of iron." So, chariots of iron is like kryptonite to God. And so this is our Iron Chariots, and so if you check out ironchariots.org, you can find this nicely compiled list of common arguments for the existence of God and what's wrong with them, arguments against the existence of God and how to defend them against common objections, and then general arguments against atheism, and then like atheist resources about authors and places to look. So I hate to toot my own horn, but I find that incredibly useful.
Is it a wiki?
Yes, it is a wiki.
Okay, once again, I want to thank Russell for talking. And,
Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things is the internet is this wonderful thing, but it's also, we're social animals, and there's a lot of studies that show that interpersonal actions like we're having today
Right.
are way more satisfactory. Like people go and they check their Facebook, and it gives them a quick high, but it's like getting
Yeah, it's a little addictive. That's true.
And it's not as valuable as having real relationships. And it's also on the internet, you know, the anonymity and lack of accountability can be much more hostile. I mean, you know,
Right.
you'll probably receive lots of threats there, but
Yeah, I mean, people say things to a suicidal teenager that they would not say to her face, for sure. And
so the thing that I have is, you're talking about leveraging the internet.
mhm.
How do we leverage, what's your ideas on leveraging to get more participation in this world? Because we have this increased participation on the internet, but this room is probably as full as it was 8 years ago. And
That's
even though
true.
20% of people are self-identifying as non-religious. We probably represent less than a tenth of a percent of the people in Austin who are meeting
Right.
to discuss these topics.
You know, I don't know that, I mean, I think you're probably right that meetings by the atheist community of Austin aren't necessarily growing that fast. But on the other hand, I am hearing about a lot of similar organizations opening up in other cities that you wouldn't expect. That there are more and more student groups getting created, like as branches of the Secular Student Alliance all over the place. And more local groups, like there's one in Seattle that's thriving really well, and there are even occasionally atheist communities in places that you wouldn't necessarily expect. I think near where Beth is from, Asheville, North Carolina, has a really good atheist community with their own TV show. Baby steps. It's still kind of small. I would think that without the internet, which already pretty much existed back when the atheist community of Austin was created, we wouldn't have done nearly as well as we already have. But there's always more we could do. Apparently, we got to move on. But what were you going to say? Oh, okay.
One quick comment on the unaffiliated Q forum poll. If you dig into some of their questionnaires, I found one where they asked both the affiliated and the unaffiliated, have you had a supernatural experience with a ghost or something of this sort? And it was the same percentage, about 18 to 20%, in each group said yes. So
Yeah.
those people who said yes on the unaffiliated are probably not part of this group quite yet.
No, but yeah, I mean, even just because you're an atheist doesn't mean you're a critical thinker either.
Well,
but
because you say none doesn't mean that you're an atheist. It's just
right, that's true.
care.
Yeah, so there are a lot of nones, and I still say that it's very encouraging that they're growing. And the number of atheists is somewhere around 5%, I think, which is really small, but it is also moving up in the right direction.
A lot of people will say they're spiritual, not religious.
Yeah, those are people you can argue with on Facebook. They're on the right track, but they can keep being pushed that way.